When we launched the original barefaced 210 cab, it was available in two different impedances, 4 ohm or 12 ohm. So 4 ohm for standalone use and 12 ohm if you wanted to stack multiples. And then I found myself thinking, well, can we make this switchable? And eventually found some time to see if that was possible. And it was. It took a bit of cunning. So we now sell the 210S, S for switchable, which is 4 ohm impedance or 12 ohm impedance. And you can switch that for stacking with different cabs, working with different amps, matching up, adjusting your amp power output, or working with different amp output taps on tube valve amps. But sometimes you will want to change an old 4 ohm 210 or an old 12 ohm 210 into a switchable one. And we can sell you the parts for that. Not cheap, 'cause it's quite a lot of parts, and you're basically changing all the wiring loom, the crossover and those sort of things. And it's not a difficult job to do, but you do have to do it carefully, not in a rush, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So this is a current 210S. Basically, the essence of this process is removing removing grill, removing speakers, removing backplate, removing wiring loom, disconnecting everything, and then reversing the process to put the new things in. There are some extra components to remove on the old 210 cabs, which were not attached to the crossover backplatey thing, but they're not on here. But yeah, remove those bits. I will make that clear, point out where you would find them. So we've got screws holding the grill on. The grill has foam tape, which is a single-sided self-adhesive foam tape stuck to the back of the steel grill to stop it buzzing. If your 210 happens to have a cloth grill, then we have a video on here about how to change a tweeter, and that's on a cloth grill cab, so you can see the cloth grill removal process. And we also have a how to change your driver in a guitar cab, and that the guitar cab cloth grills are attached in the same way. So with the steel grill, you don't need to loosen off these corners. They're not in the way of the clearance of the grill. I'm using an electric screwdriver for this. It's a PZ2 heads. That's a posi drive size 2. It's basically a medium-y Phillips will fit, but you do have to be more careful with Phillips screwdrivers because they do not fit as perfectly in posi drive crosshead screws, and they cam out. That's part of the inherent design of a Phillips head. Unfortunately, if you're in the US, you're probably not going to have posi drive screwdrivers around unless you have lots of tools. So I know Europe, we're on the posi drive. I don't know about the rest of the world, what everyone uses. Posi drive is identifiable because it has a second cross. There's the main cross of the crosshead, and then there's a second smaller cross that helps the bit locate more effectively. Now, what you will inevitably find, if this grill has been on there for more than a few days, the foam tape that is stuck to the back of the grill will seem like it is also glued to the front of the cab. So we have these mounts that the grill sits on. It's not glued with adhesive, it's just the way that foam tends to stick to things when it's pressed against stuff for a long time. Don't lose the screws. You will notice that all the screws have rubber washers on the back of them. They're quite expensive little washers, these. They're critical to stop things buzzing because you're dealing with a lot of sound output and vibration. You do not want buzzes to happen. Don't damage the edge of the cab when you're levering this out. Paint scrapers are good, but really be careful, be slow. Can you hear the noise? There we go. If it's not wanting to come out, start near an edge. You may, if it's sticking, you may want to use the corner as a levering point because the corner is harder than the Tolex, but again, you don't want to scratch the corner up. So just be slow, be careful. Now watch. Once I get my finger under there, I'm a bit less ham-fisted. Listen to the sticky peely sound as it unsticks. So don't try and pull it out straight because there is a lot. It will be stuck, and this grill was only put in a few days ago. But let it release. Slow and steady wins the race. Be the tortoise, not the crashing hare. There we go. But Aesop didn't realise he was going to be referenced in a technical video in 2022. Hang on. What we want to do ideally is keep that foam tape off without any damage. If you do damage the foam tape, the way the Grille is designed, you do not see the foam tape. So you can use any foam tape like would be used for weather stripping or similar to replace the original foam tape. But please, if you have wrecked the foam tape in the process of taking the Grille off, don't think you can go without it. Well, you can try for a gig and then be really annoyed with the buzzing, because it will happen. So, here's the drivers. Don't drop your screwdriver through them and make a hole in the cone. These are expensive. You know, when you're placing the screwdriver head, make sure you've got your hand there to protect things. Make sure the bit is seated. I would run the screwdriver on low, and to be perfectly honest, you're better off with one of these. And the reason is that the machine screws, they're not actually bolts, they are machine screws, but most people get the two confused. They are not wood screws. They go into T-nuts, which are threaded inserts which are pushed into the back. They have spikes holding them in, and the T-nuts do not always hold in under the pressure of you undoing the screw. So what I would suggest is you undo the screw lightly, just use enough pressure to make sure that the screwdriver doesn't jump. So get a few turns. There we go. There we go. Now, on the original 12 ohm version of this cab, you have two speakers wired in series with a capacitor across the terminals of one of the speakers. So you need to remove that capacitor. You can snip it out or take it off the spades if it's on a separate set of push-on spade connectory things. If it is a 4 ohm version, it will be parallel wired, and there will be an inductor in series with one of the speakers. That inductor is a fairly substantial lump of copper wire around a ferrite core, so you will want to be removing that. It will be cable tied in place within the cab. You can find it by following the leads along. So that needs to come out, and all the rest of the wires need to come out. You need to disconnect them from the speakers and then unscrew the backplate and pull them all out through the back of the cab. The inside of a 210S is not like other base cabs, though it's like a 110 and it's like a 410, but they are pretty unusual cabs. They're an unusual design because we use this hybrid resonator enclosure. I was going to use the electric screwdriver for this, but you know, it's much less stressful actually. See how little pressure I'm putting on. We do not want to push those T-nuts out because it's just irritating. If they do come out, you can get them back in. The best way to get them back in after the fact is with a G-clamp, or you can manually push them back in by whirring the bolt in. Squeeze them back in pretty firmly with your fingers. But the bolt always pulls the T-nut back into place. So once the T-nut's there and the bolt's threaded into it, you're sorted. But the problem is, whilst the T-nut does not have a bolt in it and has enough play for the prongs of the T-nut to come out. So there we are. Speaker coming out. And you can see, here's your spade connectors. Don't yank on them. Just give them a wiggle. They are locking. They have a little clippy sort of bit that fits in a hole in the tab. Off they come. Note the polarity, plus and minus, marked on the speaker terminals. We've got the red wires for plus. On an older cab, it will be the marked wire. So if it's a white wire, where most of the wire is white, then the one with the black stripe on it will be positive. And if it's a black cable, then the part of the black cable with a white stripe on it will be positive. So it's always the distinctive cable is the positive one. So let's move that speaker to one side. I'm not going to take the other speaker out because it's just going to take more time, and the process is the same for the second speaker, and this will make this video even longer and more boring than it already is. So I will be very careful turning this over, because what I do not want to do is, once the grill is off, stick a hole or dent or any damage to this speaker, as it's... I would also recommend do this on a flat surface, on the floor, on a carpet or something, so you're not damaging the speaker. So here's our backplate. These are wood screws into the cab. You do not want to over tighten these and strip the threads. If you strip the threads, you can pack them out with matchsticks or cocktail sticks, and as long as it grips tight and you know you get a good positive connection and things clamp down well, that is all good. This backplate here has gasket tape on it because air leaks are disastrous in loudspeakers. The pressures inside this loudspeaker when it is cranked up get high, and the air leaks end up sort of making whistling, farting, distorted noises. Is not good. So, and the gasket tape likes to stick down because that's what foam tape does, but the gasket is stuck originally to the back of the metal. Let's see if I can do this with my fingers. No, I can't quite get under there, so we can get under. Let's get the, this is the best way, paint scraper to protect things. The backplate dish is powder coated steel. Powder coating is pretty tough, but you don't want to chip it. There we go. There we go, it's lifting. Easy. Be gentle, be mechanically sensitive. So there we are. Backplate assembly comes out, and you will see there are two wires on it. One marked LP port, so that is the wire that goes to the speaker nearest the port. So this is the output of the Helmholtz resonator. It's not a ported cab. It has what you can call a port and what looks like a port on it, but it's not working like a normal ported cab. So one wire goes to the speaker nearest the port, and the other wire goes to the other speaker. So one's running full range and one is low pass, hence the FR and LP that's written on there. And that has to be threaded through the slot inside the cab, through the insulation in the cab to the other side, and connected to the woofers. Over we go. So here's where the cables come through inside here. Poke your hand down in there, you will find the hole. Feed that cable through and make sure you connect up to the correct woofers and get the polarities correct. These things matter. So you can see it's not that difficult, but there's just, you know, things to watch out for. Now I am going to reverse the process, so this will, you know, you can stop watching now and go and do something else, but I might as well complete it, because then you can, you know, if I come across anything where I think, oh, I should mention that, I can do that. There we go. Want to get things lined up, make sure you're matching the original screw holes. These are the sort of things that matter, where you need to have a bit of mechanical sympathy. Tighten that up like that. So these really only need to be snug. You do not need to be clamping these down hard. The woofer bolts need to be done up tight. Tightness is kind of hard to judge. I mean, I could give you a Newton meter amount, but, or pounds feet if you're imperial. What do they call that? English in the US. But what I would say is these, you know, you do not need to go tight on these. but the ones on the woofer, a fair amount of force. A fair amount of force. Try and remember how tight they felt when you undid them and do the reverse of that. That's probably the wisest way to approach things. So, woofer. So, wiggle, wiggle, push, click. You hear the click? Wiggle, wiggle. There we are. Clicked into place. Now, it doesn't technically matter which way up these go, but we do have a convention because we like things to look nice. So these gluey blobs here, which are meant to be there, these are where the tinsel leads on the inside of the driver poke through the cone, and the convention in most speakers nowadays is to cover them with a big dust cap because it looks nicer. It doesn't actually work as well. The sound isn't as good, and particularly the dispersion and the high frequencies are really negatively affected. But this does mean you see these on our speakers. But, you know, they work better. But as we've got these visible, we like to always have them pointing in the same direction, which is either up to 12 o'clock, or if the bolt holes are positioned so you can't have them at 12 o'clock, which they are on most of our cabs, then slightly to the left. So, and you'll see that's consistent on all our cabs. If you find a cab where that speaker does not have the leads pointing in the same way, someone's had that woofer out for some reason, because it sure as hell won't have left our factory with those pointing the wrong way. Like I say, it doesn't affect the sound, it's just an aesthetic decision. You know, if you're going to make things that are better than everything else, better sounding, better performing, then what you do not want is people judging them for not looking as good and not using them. So yeah, we make sure our cabs look very nice. Which does cost a bit more to make everything look as perfect as possible, but these things are worth paying for when they last for a very long time and make you happy for a long time. And when you stop using them, sell them to someone else, let them use them. Right, I am going to use the electric screwdriver, set quite fast. I'm going to be careful, I'm not going to push hard, but I'm not going to let it jump. I'm going to turn the torque down to minimum. This is the best way to do it with bolts on any circular thing, is opposites, and then you see the pattern. This is how you do car wheel nuts. So we're running these in at low torque. Oh, you hear that jump? You'll get away with that a few times, but you do not want to strip out the head of the screw. Right, turn the speed right down, turn the torque up, and repeat. So once you've got the torque turned up, you've got to lean on it. But if you've run them in, there's not going to be enough play for the prongs of the T-nuts to come out. Now I am not sure of the torque settings on this. I think this does not feel like it's pushing back as hard as it would. Now at this point I'd go round circumferentially rather than jumping across the diameter repeatedly, just because you may have forgotten the pattern and missed some, but at this point things really shouldn't be moving. It should all be nice and snug against the gasket that is on the back of the speaker, because of course the speaker has a gasket on the back. If the speaker doesn't want to come out, that's because the gasket tape has stuck down, and again the gasket tape is self-adhesive on one side, stuck to the back of the speaker frame. So if you are trying to peel it off, you want to get between the baffle, plywood baffle with the paint on it, and the gasket tape. You don't want to be trying to get between the gasket tape and the steel, in this case, or aluminium in some of our other speakers, of the speaker frame. So I'm going to check that with, yeah, I mean, my hand is just slipping on that. If I really grip it, yeah, I can tighten them, but I don't want to tighten it any more than that. That's plenty tight enough. There we are, solid. Now the Grille, it's easier to reinstall than to put on the first time, because the first time round we have to get all the positioning perfect. So what you want to be doing is matching the existing holes in the plywood speaker mounts at the front. So it may take a bit of pushing about, but hopefully you can get the screws to locate it. So let's see if this screw wants to find its old hole. There we go. That screw's found its hole. Let's go diagonally opposite. Don't lose these neoprene washers. I think they're neoprene, sort of rubbery. Yeah, I think they are. Whatever they are, they're bloody expensive. Yeah, well, details cost, but details are worth paying for. Yeah, so we're getting the tips of these screws into place. Now, you really do not want to slip with your screwdriver here, because this steel powder coat is tough, but the tip of your screwdriver is tougher, it's harder, so you will scratch it if you slip. So don't do that. Keep things looking pretty. As pretty as a black box can be. There we go. One more to go. James May did a program some years ago called the Reassembler, and it was like this sort of thing, but with higher production quality and more interesting content. Possibly the most boring thing he's done, so I quite like his output generally, but right, so when it comes to these rubber washers, they are essentially the same diameter as the screw head. The screws are actually a flange pan head. If you tighten up the screws too hard, all that happens is you squash the rubber washer really hard, and it ends up sort of splaying out, looking messy, and not actually being able to provide any vibration damping because you pushed it so thin. So I'm whirring these in until the rubber washer is almost contacting, and then I'm going to do it with the manual screwdriver. Also, there's foam tape behind the grill, so the grill is floating, but if you tighten this up too much, the grill will not float and will be more likely to pick up resonance from the cab itself. It shouldn't buzz, but it might start actually generating a bit of imperfect acoustic output, like a big perforated steel drum skin. So just do these up. Yeah, I'm using that trusty technique of not gripping the handle of the screwdriver that hard, and then my torque limiter is when my hand slips on it. It's funny, isn't it? If you're used to fiddling around with tools, which I've done since I was little, because my dad showed me how to do this stuff, he was an engineer, you pick up these techniques. If you haven't done it, well, hopefully you're learning something. If you have done it, maybe you hadn't realised you'd developed all these techniques. There we go, so let's... And you'll know if the grill is happy because you can knock it and it won't go brang or buzz or anything like that. Yeah, should be as dead as a dead thing dead, as a parrot indeed. This grill is dead. It's not, it's just resting. It's not resting. Nailed it to the perch. Right. Done. Do you like the new badge? We've everything's sort of changing here, in that we decided, as we'd got this new badge we rather liked that we'd launched for the guitar cabs, and it just made sense to update things. So yeah, everything's moving over to this logo, which is pretty cool. But you know, our hoodies have still got this logo. Still barefaced, but simpler life, simpler branding, fewer badges to keep in stock. There we go. I think I've done it. So one thing you might want to do when you've done this is a polarity test. And if I'd planned ahead, I'd have brought the required equipment. But to polarity test this, just to make sure that you haven't done it wrong, get a normal guitar cable. Yeah. Plug that into the cab. Get a 9-volt battery and place the terminals of the 9V, doesn't matter which way round, on there and there, yeah, and the woofers will jump. If they jump in the same direction, you've got things wired right. If they jump in opposite directions, you've got it wired wrong. And obviously, if you place the cable with the battery the same way around on each cab, they should, you know, if you've got a stack of cabs, they should all move the same way. You do not want one cab moving one way and one cab moving the other. So it should be, if you put positive, what is it, positive on the tip? Yeah, so the positive, which is the smaller one, the small sort of cylindrical one on a 9V, I think that's the right way around, and the negative is the sort of bigger, funny shaped one. Put that on, woofers should leap forward. If I've got that wrong, do tell me in the comments. I'll check it later, but we have polarity testers in the factory that we use all the time for checking stuff is in polarity, because you do not want a bass cab with reverse polarity speakers, because they just cancel each other out in the lows, so you get a really feeble sound and a lot of wasted power and a lot of wasted heat. So there we are. I'm done. Cool. That was really exciting, wasn't it? More fun stuff next time, and if it's not fun, at least it'll be interesting, you know, thinky, brainy sort of stuff, as opposed to a man with a screwdriver who can't stop talking. Thank you. See you next time.